Hi there, I'm John from CNCKing.com, and today we make custom corporate plaques. I've made a lot of custom plaques over the years, but it's the first time that I actually use a PCB board, as you see here, as part of it. So you have a PCB board up here that's screwed in with black oxide screws, and then you have the Lamacoid here, and the pallet wood here, and of course another Lamacoid here that the customer can keep adding more and more information throughout the years. Now the nice thing about a custom plaque is that you can have it totally to your spec. In this case here for the customer, it works out perfectly because the products that they get from their customers and they redistribute and recycle are actually part of the plaque itself. So essentially, these things here represent the company almost perfectly because a lot of the work is that. So the thickness of this is 3/4 inch. And it's roughly the size of a piece of paper, so 8.5 by 11. Sometimes I'm lucky with video, sometimes I'm not. In this case here, a video of me breaking down the pallets to get the wood to do basically the same thing you see here. Just didn't work out for some reason. So I actually have some footage of a mold I made a little while ago. That was basically the same steps involved as making the wood for the plaques. So in this case here, obviously it's a different project, but it's the same idea. So basically what you're doing is cutting out the wood into smaller sections, which will then be glued together. Now what you want to do is have the wood roughly the same size, and for the plaques it's a little bit different because I didn't use 2x4s like this here. I actually split them further, so they're actually little pieces of 2x2s. And the reason why I did that is because we did some testing with 2x4s and it just started to warp, while smaller pieces with glue, I guess it's double the amount of glue, that just stayed more dimensionally stable for the entire project. So after all of the material, the raw material is cut to size and that kind of thing, the next step is to feed it to the router. Now what the router is doing is flattening the top and the back, or the top and the front, or however you want to have it, the front and the back of the wood, and it's making it totally flat. And that's very important because when I do the glue up, I don't want to see seams everywhere. Now obviously you'll see seams where the grain doesn't match, the texture doesn't match, and so forth. But you get a very, very tight fit this way. Now of course I have a planer in the shop, a thickness planer, and I could essentially do the same thing as what you see here. And it actually would be a little bit faster. What I found is the seams that I get from the CNC are absolutely 100% perfect every time. And you just don't get that with a planer. With a planer, it works out pretty good, but it's not anywhere near the level of awesomeness that you get from a CNC. So that's why you always see me having videos when I'm flattening wood or so forth. I'm using the CNC instead of planers. It's just a new technology that works really, really well. So what I did again for the plaques, the same idea. So those were 2x2s, and what I would do is flatten two sides. Once you flatten the two sides, then you have something that can be glued together into a composite and basically create your own sheets of material. Then after that, use the router once the wood is dry, and then use the router to cut out the plaques. Now, of course, I have a bandsaw, I have a table, so I have other tools to manually do this, but I found it easier again just to use the CNC. CNC cuts out the plaques exactly to spec each and every time. Now for years when it comes to painting and finishing, I've been using these little triangles, which actually work wonderfully. The problem is I never have enough of them. And you throw them basically on the table, and you always have the spacing that's not right or so forth. So it's a little bit harder to work with than you might think when you have more volume. So what I decided to do, instead of buying a whole bunch more of these, I decided to fabricate my own to suit my needs. And that's what this is here. So basically it's a flat thing, so when I put it away, it's flat pack basically. And when I need to use it, you have this and you have this small interlocking part. Fits right in there. So this holds it up, and I have one in the middle, and I have another one here at the edge. So what this allows me to do is that when you have, in this case here we had the plaque, I was finishing it. This fits over here, and you'll notice that very little, get the light working right here, very little of this makes contact with this. And that's very important because let's say as an extreme you had it this way here and you have the plaques on here, what you end up having, whether you stain it or do some tung oil or whatever, is you end up with lines on the back of it. But if you had little peaks like this here, again, the same idea as these, but actually it's better because these ones are kind of worn out, so they're kind of rounded. These ones are sharp peaks, and because of that, very little of the surface area that I just stained or painted or what have you actually is in contact with this, which means that there's no marks on the back of it. The other advantage is whenever I need more, I can just make them here in the shop. This is just 1/8 inch thick MDF, so it's available pretty much anywhere, and it works wonderfully for this project. Probably the most useful material I have here in the shop is actually 1/8 inch MDF, which is what I'm making these standoffs from. It's not very flammable, which works great for welding applications, for making jigs, and offsets just for holding material temporarily while I tack weld it. I also use it for a lot of painting applications, and actually even make my own, when you glue wood together, those little spigots, I make my own using 1/8 inch MDF as well. It's just a wonderful material. It's plentifully available anywhere, and you pretty much do anything with it. Now you can see them in action here, the standoffs. So what I want to do is I'm staining both sides of this plaque to save a day of curing time basically. And doing that means that I can't have it touch the table, because then not only the stain will go on the table, it doesn't really matter because it's a spoil board, but I don't want to have stains on the front or the back side of it showing where I supported the material. That's why the standoffs have 90 degrees at the top, because that means there's a very, very small point of contact, but there's a lot of points of contact to support the plaque. Now it's a little bit like the bed of nails trick that you used to see a long time ago. So someone would lay on a bed of nails, and the nails would come up and they wouldn't pierce the skin because they're supported by so many points on it. So this works basically the same way. So what I'm doing here is initially I did the PCB boards, I did the front, and then I do the back. And I made myself a little paper jig. I just know exactly where to position the picture frame element in the back of it. And then I just drill the initial holes, pilot holes, and then I drill them in permanently. Now, this whole process takes quite a bit of time. That's why there's a massive amount of time lapse. But it's actually a fun process. But the dumber you can make things with jigs and little things that you support, the better the project ends up being, because you're not thinking about it. You're just, here's one, do it, put it back. Here's the next one, do it, put it back. So when it comes to having custom plaques made, in this case here, your material options are endless. And originally when we were designing this, we actually were considering using stainless steel for this instead of a Lamacoid. We ended up going with the Lamacoid for two reasons. One is the weight. Lamacoids are very, very light, and because of that, you can just stick them on and they'll just stay there. Stainless steel, you need to go a little bit thicker because it's etched, and therefore there's some weight involved. And the other thing is the contrast. You see it here, you won't have this much sort of blackness, if I put it that way, if it was stainless steel. So it's a little bit more of a muted sort of result that you get with the Lamacoid instead of a stainless steel. Another option would be anodized aluminum, but there's no real color that sort of worked out well with the plaque. Because you got to remember, we're making these with PCB boards. So roughly our color scheme is we wanted something that went well with this, which might not seem that difficult, but you know, there's a lot of options available that just didn't suit my needs. So when it comes to making custom plaques, contact us at CNCKing.com. We'll make them for you and ship them right to your door.